When I stood at that church door and saw my son Max walking down the aisle without me, his own mother who had sacrificed everything for him, I made a decision that would change our family forever. I opened my purse, pulled out a single envelope, and shouted loud enough for every guest to hear, "Before you say I do, everyone here needs to know who really paid for this wedding, this dress, and this ring on her finger." The entire ceremony stopped. Lena's face went white as a sheet. And what I revealed next made 3 people faint and caused the bride's mother to scream words I can't repeat on camera. My name is Margaret. I'm 72 years old. And this is the day I stopped being the doormat mother and became the woman my late husband always knew I could be. Before I tell you what happened next, comment below which city you're watching from and subscribe to hear more stories like mine, because every grandmother has secrets, but not all of us have the courage to tell them. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks before the wedding. I held that cream-colored envelope in my hands, feeling how expensive the paper was, and smiled thinking about how proud I was of my son Max. But when I opened it, my hands started shaking. The wedding was scheduled for June 15th at 2 p.m. at St. Michael's Cathedral. What froze my blood was the small handwritten note that fell out. Mom, Lena, and I decided to have a very intimate ceremony. Family only. We'll celebrate with you another day. I called Max immediately, my heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. Honey, what does this note mean? I am family. I'm your mother. His voice sounded strange, distant, like he was reading from a script someone else had written. Mom, it's complicated. Lena's family is very traditional. They have specific ideas about who should be at the ceremony. We'll do something special just for you later, I promise. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. Max, I raised you alone after your father died. I worked 2 jobs so you could go to college. Are you telling me I can't watch my only son get married? The silence on the other end of the line lasted an eternity. Then I heard Lena's voice in the background, sharp and commanding. Tell her we already decided, Max. Don't let her manipulate you with guilt. My son, the boy I had carried in my womb for 9 months, the man I had sacrificed everything for, simply said, Mom, I have to go. We'll talk later. And he hung up. I stood there in my kitchen, holding the phone, staring at that invitation that was really a rejection letter. For the first time in my life, I felt what it was like to be erased by your own child. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, remembering every sacrifice I had made for Max. The overtime shifts at the hospital where I worked as a nurse. The community college classes I never finished because I needed the money for his private school tuition. The vacation I never took because every dollar went toward his future. My late husband Tom had died when Max was only 8 years old, leaving me with a mortgage, medical bills, and a child to raise alone. I had promised Tom on his deathbed that our son would have every opportunity, every advantage, every chance to succeed. And I had kept that promise. Max graduated from college debt-free because I worked 70-hour weeks. He got his first car because I drove my 15-year-old sedan until the engine died. He had a beautiful apartment because I lived in the same small house for 30 years, never remodeling, never upgrading, saving every penny for him. And now, after 29 years of putting him first, he was telling me I wasn't important enough to attend his wedding. The pain was so deep I couldn't even cry. It was beyond tears, beyond anger. It was a kind of devastation I had never felt before. The next morning, I called my sister Patricia in Florida. She had always been the tough one in our family, the one who didn't take nonsense from anyone. When I told her what happened, she was silent for a long moment. Then she said something that changed everything. Margaret, have you checked your bank accounts lately? Have you looked at the credit cards Max still has access to from when you helped him build credit? My blood ran cold. I hadn't thought about that. Max had access to my savings account from years ago when I added him as a joint holder in case of emergencies. I hung up with Patricia and immediately logged into my online banking. What I saw made my hands shake so violently I almost dropped my laptop. Over the past 6 months, there had been withdrawals I didn't recognize. $3,000 in January, $5,000 in February, $8,000 in March, $12,000 in April. The description said, wedding expenses and event planning and vendor deposits. My son had been stealing from me to pay for a wedding he wasn't even inviting me to. The total came to $31,000 from my savings account alone. But that wasn't all. When I checked the credit card I had co-signed for him years ago, thinking he would use it responsibly, I found another $18,000 in charges, catering services, a wedding dress from an exclusive boutique, flowers, photography, a honeymoon package to Italy. He had maxed out the card, and according to the statement, he had only been making minimum payments. As the co-signer, I was legally responsible for every penny. My carefully saved retirement fund, the money Tom's life insurance had provided, the nest egg I had protected for 30 years, was being drained to fund my own exclusion. I sat at my kitchen table and did something I hadn't done since Tom's funeral. I cried. Not quiet tears, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place of absolute betrayal. How could my son do this to me? How could the boy I had raised with so much love turn into someone who would steal from his own mother? I thought about calling Max immediately, confronting him, demanding answers. But something stopped me. A small voice in my head, maybe Tom's voice, maybe my own survival instinct, told me to wait, to gather all the information first, to understand the full scope of what was happening before I made my move. Over the next 3 days, I became a detective investigating my own son. I went through old emails and found correspondence between Max and various wedding vendors. In every email, he talked about how, "My mother is handling the finances, and my mother will send payment." He had used my name, my credit, my money, all while planning to exclude me from the actual event. I found text messages on an old phone he had left at my house during his last visit. Messages to Lena saying things like, "Don't worry, Mom will never know how much we're really spending, and she'll probably leave me everything when she dies anyway, so technically we're just accessing it early." That last message broke something inside me. My son wasn't just taking my money. He was counting on my death as part of his financial planning. I was no longer a person to him. I was a resource to be managed and eventually inherited. Lena's responses were even worse. "Your mom is so pathetic, always trying to buy your love. At least we can use her money for something good. And make sure she doesn't find out about the wedding costs. We need to keep her thinking everything is cheap and simple." They had been laughing at me, mocking my generosity, using my love as a weapon against me. I needed to know more. I drove to the cathedral where the wedding was scheduled and spoke with Father Michael, who had baptized Max as a baby. "Margaret," he said warmly, "I'm so looking forward to Max's wedding. You must be so proud." I forced a smile. "Father, can you tell me about the ceremony? Max has been so secretive about the details." Father Michael looked confused. "Secretive? But I thought you were planning everything. Max told me you insisted on handling all the arrangements because you wanted it to be perfect for him." My son had lied to everyone. He had told the priest I was the controlling mother who demanded to plan everything. He had probably told Lena's family the same thing, painting me as overbearing and intrusive. That's why they felt justified in excluding me. They thought they were protecting Max from his demanding mother. "Father," I said carefully, "did Max tell you I wouldn't be attending the ceremony?" The priest's face went pale. "What? That's impossible. You're his mother. Of course you'll be there. You're listed as the mother of the groom in all our paperwork." But when Father Michael checked his files, he found a recent email from Lena requesting that my name be removed from the program. The reason given was family estrangement due to the mother's disapproval of the marriage. Another lie. I had never disapproved of Lena. I had welcomed her into our family, hosted dinners for her, even given her my grandmother's pearl necklace as an engagement gift. Those pearls had been in our family for 3 generations, worth over $8,000. And I had given them freely because I thought she would be my daughter-in-law, part of our family forever. I left the church feeling numb. Every new piece of information was another knife in my heart. That evening, I did something I had never done before. I hired a private investigator. His name was Robert Chen, and he came highly recommended by a friend at the hospital. "Mrs. Sullivan," he said when we met at a coffee shop, "what exactly are you looking for?" I took a deep breath. I want to know everything about my son's fiancée. Her background, her family, her finances. I want to know why she's doing this to me. Robert called me 4 days later. Mrs. Sullivan, I think you should sit down for this. What he told me explained everything. Lena came from a wealthy family, but she had been cut off 2 years ago after a major falling out with her parents over her gambling addiction. She had racked up over $60,000 in debt at various casinos, and her family had refused to pay it off again. That's when she met Max at a charity event I had paid for him to attend. Robert had found emails between Lena and her friends where she specifically talked about targeting someone with family money to solve her problems. But here's what made my blood boil. Lena thought I was rich. She had seen the nice gifts I gave Max, the money I sent for emergencies, the way I always helped without hesitation, and assumed I was wealthy. She didn't know I was a retired nurse living on a fixed income. She didn't know every dollar I gave Max came from 30 years of careful saving and sacrifice. She thought she had found an easy mark, a generous mother-in-law with deep pockets who would fund their lifestyle forever. Max either didn't realize her real intentions, or didn't care as long as someone was paying off his own credit card debt, which Robert discovered was another $23,000 I knew nothing about. The wedding was now 2 weeks away. I had all the information I needed. My son had stolen $49,000 from me. He had lied to everyone about me. He had excluded me from his wedding while using my money to pay for it. His fiancée was a con artist who saw me as a retirement plan. And they were both counting on me being too weak, too loving, too desperate for my son's approval to do anything about it. They had miscalculated badly. I wasn't the same woman who had cried in her kitchen 2 weeks ago. That woman had died the moment I saw, technically we're just accessing it early, on my son's phone. I called my lawyer, David Morrison, who had handled Tom's estate. David, I need to understand my legal options. After explaining everything, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Margaret, as a co-signer on that credit card, you're responsible for the debt. But the money he took from your joint savings account, that's murkier. Technically, he had legal access as a joint account holder, even if what he did was morally wrong. However, we might have a case for fraud given the false pretenses. I didn't care about the legal case. I cared about something else entirely. David, I want to remove Max from all my accounts immediately. I want him off my will. I want every connection between his finances and mine severed completely. David didn't argue. He knew me well enough to understand that when I made a decision like this, it was final. We spent the next 3 days doing paperwork. Max was removed as a beneficiary, removed from my accounts, removed from my life on paper. But I wasn't done. Not even close. I had a plan forming in my mind, something that would expose the truth to everyone who mattered. I went shopping for the first time in years, buying myself a beautiful navy blue dress and matching shoes. I got my hair done at a proper salon instead of cutting it myself in the bathroom. I bought a gift for the happy couple, a crystal vase that cost $300, far more than I would normally spend. And I had it engraved with a special message. To Max and Lena, may your marriage be built on the same foundation as your wedding. Love, truth, and sacrifice. With all my heart, Mom. The woman at the engraving shop thought it was sweet. She didn't understand the bitter irony in every word. The Thursday before the wedding, Max called me. It was the first time I had heard from him since our initial conversation. Mom, I know you're upset about the wedding, but I want you to know that Lena and I really do plan to celebrate with you. Maybe we can have dinner next month. His voice was light, casual, as if he hadn't stolen $50,000 from me. As if he hadn't erased me from the most important day of his life. I took a deep breath and said something that surprised even me. That sounds lovely, honey. I understand completely. You two do what's right for you. The relief in his voice was palpable. Really, Mom? You're not mad? I smiled, looking at myself in the mirror, seeing a stranger looking back at me, a woman with steel in her spine and fire in her eyes. Sweetheart, I could never stay mad at you. You're my son. I love you unconditionally. I heard him tell Lena in the background. See, I told you she'd understand. She always does. They laughed together, probably relieved that the guilt-tripping mother had finally backed down. They thought they had won. They thought I would quietly accept my role as the family ATM, grateful for whatever crumbs of attention they threw my way. That night, I wrote a letter. Not to Max, but to myself. A letter from the old Margaret to the new one, acknowledging what I had lost and what I had gained. Dear Margaret, I wrote, you spent 29 years being the perfect mother. You sacrificed everything, asked for nothing, and loved unconditionally. But unconditional love doesn't mean unconditional acceptance of cruelty. Tom would be proud of what you're about to do. Not because it's vengeful, but because it's honest. Because it's time someone told the truth in this family. Because your son needs to learn that actions have consequences, even when those actions hurt the person who loves you most. I sealed the letter in an envelope and put it in my dresser drawer. Then I laid out my navy blue dress for Saturday. I checked the crystal vase one more time, running my fingers over the engraved words. I printed out every bank statement, every withdrawal record, every text message I had found. I put them all in a leather portfolio that had belonged to Tom. And then I practiced what I would say. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and rehearsed the words over and over until they sounded natural, powerful, true. Saturday morning arrived with bright sunshine, the kind of perfect weather every bride hopes for. I woke up early, made myself a good breakfast, and took my time getting ready. I did my makeup carefully, put on my new dress, clasped the simple gold necklace Tom had given me on our 10th anniversary. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked dignified, composed, ready for battle. Tom, I said to his picture on my nightstand, I hope I'm doing the right thing. I hope you'd understand. I swear I felt his presence in that moment, a warmth that told me he absolutely would understand. I drove to St. Michael's Cathedral at 1:30 p.m., 30 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to start. The parking lot was already filling up with luxury cars. Lena's wealthy friends and family, no doubt, along with Max's colleagues and the social climbers who never gave me the time of day. I parked in the back, took my leather portfolio, picked up the crystal vase from the passenger seat, and walked toward the church entrance. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. After 30 years of shaking hands while I made difficult medical decisions in the ICU, I had learned to function through fear. The ushers at the door looked confused when they saw me. One of them, a young man in a too-tight suit, actually stepped forward to block my path. Ma'am, this is a private ceremony. Do you have an invitation? I smiled sweetly and said, I'm Margaret Sullivan, Max's mother. His face went white. He clearly had been told something about the crazy mother who wasn't invited. I need to check with... But I was already walking past him into the vestibule. I could hear organ music playing softly in the sanctuary. Through the doorway, I could see guests settling into pews, dressed in their finest clothes. And that's when I saw them. Max at the altar in his tuxedo, looking handsome and nervous. Lena in her dress, my $8,000 dress that she had bought with my money, looking radiant and triumphant. Her parents in the front row, beaming with pride. My son's friends filling the pews. Everyone who mattered to them was there. Everyone except the woman who had made it all possible. I felt that old pain trying to resurface, that desperate need to be loved and accepted by my own child. But I pushed it down and replaced it with something stronger. Truth, justice, self-respect. Father Michael saw me from the altar and his eyes went wide. He started to move toward me, probably to ask what I was doing there, but I was faster. I walked straight down that center aisle, my heels clicking on the marble floor, every eye turning to watch me. The music stopped. People gasped. Lena's face went from radiant to horrified in seconds. Max looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. I walked all the way to the front, placed the crystal vase on the gift table with a loud thunk, and then turned to face the congregation. 300 people staring at me in shocked silence. I opened my leather portfolio and said in a voice that carried to every corner of that cathedral, Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Margaret Sullivan, Max's mother. I wasn't invited to this wedding, but since I paid for it, I thought I should at least come to see where my $50,000 went. The silence that followed my announcement was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that massive cathedral. Max's face had gone from pale to crimson red. Lena's mouth was hanging open like a fish gasping for air. Her mother, a woman in a ridiculous pink hat who I'd never met, actually stood up and shouted, "Security! Someone call security!" But Father Michael just stood there at the altar, his hand over his mouth, staring at me with a mixture of shock and something that looked like respect. He knew I wasn't lying. He had seen Max's lies firsthand. I continued in that same clear, carrying voice. Let me be more specific since you all look so confused. January 15th. Max withdrew $3,000 from our joint account. February 22nd, 5,000 more. March 10th, 8,000. April 3rd, 12,000. I was reading from my bank statements now, holding them up so people in the front rows could see the printed numbers. And that's just from my savings account. The credit card I co-signed for him has another $18,000 in wedding expenses. That beautiful dress Lena is wearing? $8,000 of my retirement money. Those flowers? $3,500? The photographer capturing this lovely moment? $4,000. Max finally found his voice. Mom, stop! You're embarrassing yourself. His voice cracked on the last word. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Embarrassing myself, Max? No, honey. I'm embarrassing you. There's a difference. I turned to address the congregation again. My son told me this was going to be a small, intimate ceremony. Just immediate family. That's why I couldn't attend. Because I'm not intimate enough family, apparently. But 300 people seems rather intimate, doesn't it? A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. Some people were already pulling out their phones. This was going to be all over social media in minutes. Lena stepped forward, and I saw her true face for the first time without the mask of sweet daughter-in-law. You're insane! Max told me you were mentally unstable. This proves it! She turned to the guests with tears streaming down her face. Real tears this time, but tears of rage, not sadness. This woman has been harassing us for months, making up stories about money, trying to control our lives. We didn't invite her because she's not well. We wanted to protect her from herself. It was a good performance. Several people were nodding sympathetically. They believed her. Why wouldn't they? A young, beautiful bride versus a bitter old woman causing a scene. But I had prepared for this. I reached into my portfolio and pulled out the text messages I'd printed. Robert Chen is a private investigator I hired 2 weeks ago. These are text messages from Lena's phone to her friend Jessica Moreno dated 6 months ago. I started reading. Finally found a guy with a loaded mom. She's so desperate for him to love her, she'll pay for anything. This gambling debt will be gone in no time. I looked up at Lena's frozen face. Should I read the next one? The one where you discuss how you plan to get me to co-sign for a house after the wedding? Or the one where you call me a pathetic old cow with a checkbook? The crowd erupted in gasps and murmurs. Lena's face had gone from red to white. Those are fake. She fabricated those. But her voice was shaking now. Her mother was pulling on her arm, whispering frantically. I turned to face Max directly for the first time. My son. My baby boy. The child I had rocked to sleep, nursed through fevers, celebrated every milestone with. Max, I found your messages too. The ones where you told Lena I'd probably die soon and you'd inherit everything. The ones where you laughed about me being so pathetic, always trying to buy your love. Tell me, honey, when did I become a punchline to you? Max's legs seemed to buckle. He grabbed the altar rail for support. Mom, those were taken out of context. I was just frustrated. I didn't mean... But he couldn't finish the sentence. What context would make those words acceptable? What explanation would erase the cruelty? Father Michael spoke for the first time, his voice heavy with disappointment. Max, is what your mother is saying true? Did you take money from her without permission? My son's silence was all the answer anyone needed. Some of Max's groomsmen were looking at him with disgust. One of them, his college roommate Jake, actually walked out of the church shaking his head. Lena's father stood up, a tall man in an expensive suit with a face like thunder. Lena Marie Thompson, what is this woman talking about? Gambling debts? We cut you off because you promised you'd gotten help. So her parents didn't know she'd been lying to them too. Lena spun toward him, and for a moment I saw pure panic in her eyes. Daddy, she's making it up. She's crazy. Max told me his mother had dementia. Another lie. Another desperate attempt to paint me as the villain. But her father wasn't buying it anymore. I could see the realization dawning on his face. His daughter hadn't changed at all. I took a step closer to my son. Max, I want you to know something. Every single sacrifice I made for you, I made out of love. Real, unconditional, mother's love. I worked 70-hour weeks so you could go to the college you wanted. I drove a car held together with duct tape so you could have a reliable vehicle. I ate ramen noodles for dinner so you could have steak. I never remarried, never took a vacation, never bought myself anything nice because every dollar I had went to giving you the life your father and I dreamed you'd have. My voice cracked, but I pushed through. And you stole from me. You laughed at me. You erased me from the most important day of your life. Mom, I'm sorry, Max whispered, tears streaming down his face now. I'm so sorry. It got out of control. The wedding planning, the expenses. Lena wanted everything to be perfect, and I couldn't tell her no, and then I couldn't tell you the truth, and it just spiraled. He was sobbing now, this grown man in his tuxedo, crying like the little boy he used to be. Part of me wanted to go to him, to hold him, to tell him it was okay. That's what 30 years of mothering does to you. It makes you want to comfort even the person who hurt you most. But I stayed where I was. Some things can't be fixed with a hug. Looking back now, standing in front of everyone who mattered in my son's life, I realized something I should have understood years earlier. I had loved Max so completely that I forgot to teach him how to love me back. Lena grabbed Max's arm, her voice sharp and commanding even in crisis. Don't apologize to her. She's trying to manipulate you like she always does. This is emotional blackmail. But Max shook her off, something I'd never seen him do before. Lena, stop. Just stop. She's right, about everything. We used her. I used her. He looked at me with red, swollen eyes. Mom, I know sorry isn't enough. I know I can't fix this. But I need you to know that somewhere inside me, underneath all the selfishness and greed, I do love you. I forgot how to show it. I nodded slowly. I believe you love me, Max. In your own broken way. But love without respect is just manipulation with a prettier name. I turned to address the congregation one last time. I came here today not to ruin a wedding, but to save myself. For 30 years I've been drowning in the ocean of my son's needs, and every time I came up for air, he pushed me back down. Today I'm choosing to swim to shore. I closed my portfolio. The crystal vase I brought is engraved with a message about love, truth, and sacrifice. I hope when you read it, Max, you'll understand the difference between what those words mean to me and what they mean to you. I started walking back down the aisle. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, people pulling back as if betrayal was contagious. But as I reached the middle of the church, Lena's voice rang out. You think you're so righteous. You think you're the victim here. But you're just a bitter old woman who can't let go of her son. I turned slowly. Lena was standing at the altar, her beautiful dress and perfect makeup contrasting sharply with the ugliness of her words. You smothered him his whole life. You made him feel guilty for wanting his own life. This is your fault. You created this situation by being so needy and pathetic. Several people gasped at her cruelty. Even Max looked shocked. But I smiled, because Lena had just done exactly what I'd hoped she would. She'd revealed herself completely. You're absolutely right about one thing, Lena. I did smother my son with love. I gave him everything and asked for nothing. That was my mistake. I taught him that his mother's love was infinite and free. I taught him that he could take and never give back. I taught him that my feelings didn't matter as much as his comfort. So yes, I did create this situation. But I'm ending it today. I continued toward the door, but then I heard footsteps behind me. It was Max, running down the aisle in his tuxedo. Mom, wait, please. He caught up to me in the vestibule, grabbing my arm. Up close, I could see he'd aged since I'd last really looked at him. There were lines around his eyes, gray in his hair. When had my baby boy become a middle-aged man? Mom, please don't leave like this. We can talk. We can fix this. I'll pay you back every penny, I swear. Just please don't give up on me. I looked at my son and saw past and future colliding. The little boy who used to hold my hand crossing the street. The teenager who thanked me awkwardly after I worked a double shift to buy him a prom tuxedo. The young man who cried on my shoulder when his first serious girlfriend broke his heart. And now this man, this stranger wearing my son's face, begging me not to give up on him after he'd given up on me months ago. Max, I'm not giving up on you. I'm giving up on the version of you I created in my mind, the son I thought I had. I'm accepting the son I actually have. What does that mean? He asked, his voice breaking. I reached up and touched his cheek, maybe for the last time. It means I'll always be your mother, but I won't always be your safety net. I won't be your backup plan or your retirement account or your emotional support animal. I'm removing you from my will. I'm removing you from all my accounts. Everything I have worked for will go to charity when I die, to organizations that help elderly people being financially abused by their families. Your inheritance is the lesson you're learning today. His face crumpled. So that's it? You're cutting me off completely? No, honey. I'm setting you free. Free from the obligation of pretending to love a mother you clearly resent. Free from having to manage my feelings and expectations. And I'm setting myself free too. Free from the exhausting work of trying to earn love from someone who sees me as a transaction. I stepped back from him. If you want a relationship with me going forward, it will be on equal terms. You will respect me. You will be honest with me. You will treat me like a person who deserves dignity. Not because I'm your mother, but because I'm a human being. Max stood there, tears streaming down his face, unable to speak. Behind him, I could see Lena in the doorway of the sanctuary, watching us. Her expression was cold calculation. She was already planning her next move, figuring out how to spin this to her advantage. I felt sorry for my son in that moment. He'd chosen a partner who saw him the same way he'd seen me, as a means to an end. Maybe that was poetic justice. Maybe that was just sad. Probably both. Max, I said softly, I hope someday you have children. And I hope you love them with everything you have. And then I hope they grow up and treat you exactly the way you've treated me, because that's the only way you'll truly understand what you've done. I walked out of St. Michael's Cathedral into the bright June sunshine. Behind me, I could hear chaos erupting, voices raised, people arguing, the wedding falling apart in real time. My phone was already buzzing in my purse. Probably Patricia calling to find out what happened. Probably some of the guests who had my number from years of Christmas cards and birthday parties. But I didn't answer. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove away from my son's wedding without looking back. The woman who would have died rather than hurt her child was gone. In her place was someone who had finally learned that self-respect matters more than being loved. I still remember the exact feeling of that drive home. Not relief, not sadness, not triumph. Just a strange kind of peace, like I'd been carrying a boulder on my back for 30 years, and someone had finally helped me set it down. The messages started flooding in before I even got home. Text after text, voicemail after voicemail. Most were from people I barely knew. Max's friends, Lena's relatives, people from the church. Some were supportive. You did the right thing. That took courage. I always thought something was off about that girl. Others were vicious. You're a terrible mother. You ruined their special day. I hope you're proud of yourself. I deleted them all without reading past the first line. Their opinions didn't matter anymore. The only opinion that mattered was my own, and I knew I'd done exactly what needed to be done. When I got home, I found Patricia had already let herself in using the spare key I'd given her years ago. She was in my kitchen making coffee, her suitcase by the door. I got on the first flight when you didn't answer your phone, she said without preamble. Tell me everything. So I did. I sat at my kitchen table and told her every detail. The bank accounts, the text messages, the wedding, my speech, Max's tears, Lena's rage. Patricia listened without interrupting. her face cycling through anger, disgust, and finally pride. "Margaret Sullivan," she said when I finished. "You magnificent bitch. I never thought I'd see the day." We laughed until we cried, and then we cried for real. Not for Max or for the relationship that was broken, but for all the years I'd wasted making myself small so he could feel big. Patricia poured us each a glass of the expensive whiskey Tom had been saving for a special occasion. He'd died before finding one special enough. Turns out today was it. "To new beginnings," Patricia said, raising her glass. "To self-respect," I added. We drank, and it burned going down, but it was a good burn. A cleansing burn. My phone rang around 7 p.m. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer. "Mrs. Sullivan? This is Andrew Thompson, Lena's father." His voice was formal, controlled, but I could hear the anger underneath. "I want to apologize for my daughter's behavior. I had no idea she had fallen back into her old patterns. My wife and I thought she'd gotten help, that she'd changed. Clearly we were wrong. I didn't know what to say." This man was a stranger to me, dealing with his own parental disappointment. "Mr. Thompson, your daughter is an adult responsible for her own choices. You don't owe me an apology. Nevertheless," he continued, "I want you to know that we've canceled the wedding. After what happened today, after learning about the debts and the lies, we couldn't let it go forward. Lena is, well, she's not taking it well, but it's for the best." There was a long pause. "Mrs. Sullivan, I also want you to know that my wife and I have 3 other children. All successful, all honest, all kind. Sometimes one child just goes wrong. Despite everything we did right, it's not always the parent's fault." His words hung in the air between us. "Thank you for saying that, Mr. Thompson." After we hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of my living room and let his words sink in. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had done my best, and Max had simply chosen to become someone I didn't raise him to be. The next morning, I woke up to find my story had gone viral. Someone at the wedding had recorded part of my speech and posted it online. The video had been viewed over 2 million times. The comments were a mixture of support and criticism, but most people seemed to understand why I'd done it. News outlets were calling it the Mother's Day revenge heard round the world, even though it was June. Several morning shows wanted me to come on and tell my story. I politely declined all of them. This wasn't about fame or validation. It was about drawing a line and learning to live on the other side of it. Max called on Monday morning. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Mom?" His voice was hoarse, like he'd been crying or shouting or both. "The wedding is off. Lena's parents won't pay for anything and all her debts are coming due and she's blaming me for everything and I don't know what to do." I felt that old instinct rising up. The urge to fix it, to save him, to make everything okay. But I pushed it down. "Max, I'm sorry you're going through this, but these are consequences of choices you made. You need to handle them yourself." The silence on the other end was heavy with expectation. He was waiting for me to offer money, advice, absolution. I offered none of those things. "I'm losing the apartment," he said finally. "Everything was contingent on Lena's family helping with the down payment for a house. Now I can't afford anything. I might have to declare bankruptcy because of all the debt." Part of me wanted to ask how much he needed, to calculate if I could afford to bail him out one more time. But that part was getting smaller every day. "Max, you're 31 years old. You have a college degree and a good job. You'll figure it out. People rebuild from bankruptcy. It's not the end of the world." I heard him make a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "You're really not going to help me at all? I'm helping you by not helping you. You need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. He hung up without saying goodbye. I sat there holding the phone, feeling the weight of what I'd just done. Every maternal instinct I had was screaming at me to call him back, to offer support, to soften the blow. But I didn't. I couldn't. If I saved him now, he'd never save himself. That afternoon, I went to David Morrison's office to finalize my new will. Everything was going to charity, domestic abuse shelters, organizations for elderly financial abuse victims, scholarships for nursing students who were single parents. Max wouldn't get a penny. Are you absolutely sure about this, Margaret? David asked. Once these papers are signed, they're very difficult to contest. I signed without hesitation. Patricia stayed with me for a week, and during that time we did something I hadn't done in 30 years. We lived for ourselves. We went to matinee movies in the middle of the day. We had long lunches at expensive restaurants. We bought ourselves nice things without feeling guilty. We laughed until our sides hurt. And slowly, day by day, I felt myself coming back to life. The woman I'd been before Max was born, before Tom died, before I'd defined myself entirely through sacrifice. She was still there, buried under 3 decades of putting everyone else first. But she was emerging again, stronger and wiser than before. One evening, Patricia and I were sitting on the porch drinking wine when she said something that changed my perspective entirely. You know, Margaret, you didn't just save yourself at that wedding. You probably saved Max, too. I looked at her in confusion. What do you mean? Patricia swirled her wine thoughtfully. Max was heading down a path that would have destroyed him, marrying Lena, continuing to steal from you, never facing consequences for his actions. He would have ended up a 50-year-old man-child wondering why his life fell apart. You stopped that. You forced him to face reality. That's the greatest gift a parent can give, the gift of hard truths. Maybe she was right. Maybe in hurting my son, I had actually helped him. It was a strange thought, one that went against everything I'd believed about motherhood. But maybe good parenting isn't always about making your child happy. Maybe sometimes it's about making them accountable. Max called again on Friday, a week after the cathedral confrontation. This time his voice was different, calmer, more thoughtful. Mom, I've been going to therapy. The therapist thinks I have some narcissistic tendencies and codependency issues. She wants to work on my relationship with money and with you. I felt a flicker of something that might have been hope. That's good, Max. I'm proud of you for taking that step. I need to tell you something, he continued. Lena and I had a huge fight after you left. She blamed me for ruining everything, for not managing you better. Those were her exact words. Managing you. Like you were a problem to be handled instead of a person. And I realized I'd been treating you the same way. Like a resource to manage instead of a human being with feelings. His voice cracked. Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect anything from you anymore. But I need you to know that I see it now. I see what I did. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to become someone worthy of the love you gave me. I closed my eyes, feeling tears slide down my cheeks. Max, that's all I ever wanted. For you to see me as a person, not a bank account. We talked for another hour, really talked, in a way we hadn't in years. He told me about his plans to get a second job to pay off his debts, about ending things with Lena completely, about moving into a small studio apartment he could actually afford, about starting over from scratch. And for the first time, I didn't offer to help financially. I offered something more valuable. I told him I believed in his ability to figure it out. When we hung up, I felt lighter than I had in years. But I also knew this was just the beginning. One phone call didn't erase 30 years of dysfunction. Max had a long road ahead of him, and so did I. We had to learn how to be mother and son again. But this time, as 2 adults who respected each other instead of one adult infantilizing the other. It wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks and mistakes and painful conversations. But for the first time, I had hope that we might actually build something real. Not the fantasy relationship I'd clung to, but something honest and sustainable. That night, alone in my house, I took out the letter I'd written to myself before the wedding, the one where old Margaret said goodbye to new Margaret. I added a postscript. You did it. You loved yourself enough to demand respect. You were strong enough to let go. And now you're free. Tom would be so proud. I'm proud too. I sealed it again and put it back in my dresser. Someday, maybe when I was gone, someone would find it and understand the weight of what had happened in St. Michael's Cathedral. Or maybe no one would ever read it. Either way, I'd written it for myself, as proof that I'd finally learned the hardest lesson of all. You can't love someone into loving you back the right way. You can only love yourself enough to walk away when they don't. 3 months after the wedding that never was, I received a letter in the mail. Not an email or a text, but an actual handwritten letter on plain paper. The return address was Max's new studio apartment across town. My hands trembled as I opened it, not from fear, but from the strangeness of receiving something so old-fashioned from my son who lived his entire life through screens and instant messages. "Dear Mom," it began, "I'm writing this by hand because I want you to know I took time with every word, that I thought about what I wanted to say instead of just typing whatever came to mind." I sat down at my kitchen table and read slowly, savoring each sentence like a long-lost treasure. The letter was 6 pages long. In it, Max detailed his progress in therapy, his struggles with debt, his daily decisions to choose integrity over convenience. He wrote about confronting Lena one final time and how she'd tried to manipulate him into taking her back, promising she'd changed, begging him to steal from me just one more time to pay off her gambling debts. He'd said no. For the first time in their relationship, he'd chosen his own moral compass over her desires. "I realized something, Mom," he wrote. "Lena loved me the same way I loved you. Conditionally, based on what I could provide. I became what I hated. I'm so deeply sorry." He also wrote about his new job, the second one he'd taken at a grocery store, stocking shelves from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. after his day job at the office. The other night, an elderly woman came in around midnight buying cat food and bread. She was counting out coins to make sure she had enough. I recognized the look on her face, the same look you must have had all those years when you were sacrificing everything for me. I helped her carry her bags to her car, and she thanked me like I'd given her $1 million. That's when I understood what real wealth is. It's not money. It's knowing you've helped someone without expecting anything back. The final page was the hardest to read through my tears. "Mom, I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't expect us to go back to how things were. Honestly, I don't want to go back to that. What we had wasn't healthy for either of us. But I'm asking for the chance to build something new. Something where I'm your son, but also your friend. Where I respect you not just because you're my mother, but because you're an incredible woman who deserves respect. Where you can be proud of me not for what you gave me, but for what I built myself. I love you. I'm sorry. And I'm trying to be better. Your son, Max." I must have read that letter 10 times that day. Patricia, who had extended her stay indefinitely and was now my official roommate, found me in the kitchen at sunset still holding those pages. "Good news or bad news?" she asked gently. "Complicated news," I replied. "The best kind." I showed her the letter and watched her expression soften as she read. "He's growing up," she said finally. 31 years old, and he's finally growing up. We both laughed at the absurdity and tragedy of it, how long it had taken, how much damage had been done, but also how it was never too late for someone to change if they truly wanted to. I wrote back the next day. My letter was shorter, but no less meaningful. "Dear Max, thank you for your letter. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for doing the hard work of becoming someone you can be proud of. You're right that we can't go back to how things were. But I'm willing to try building something new if you are. Let's start small. Coffee once a month, neutral location, Dutch treat. We'll talk about our lives, our thoughts, our growth. No money discussions, no guilt trips, no manipulation. Just two people learning to know each other as we actually are, not as we wish the other would be. I believe in second chances, Max, but I also believe in boundaries. Let's see if we can build a relationship that honors both. With love and hope, Mom." We met for the first time at a Starbucks halfway between our homes. It was awkward at first. Two people who shared DNA and history, but had to learn how to just be together without the weight of obligation or resentment. Max looked different. Thinner, tired from his double-shift schedule, but somehow more present than I'd ever seen him. We talked about safe topics at first. The weather, books we were reading, a funny incident Patricia had with a neighbor's cat. But gradually, as the coffee cooled and the cafe filled with afternoon customers, we ventured into deeper waters. "I saw Lena last week," Max said quietly. "She showed up at my apartment demanding I help her. She's being evicted, her parents cut her off completely, and she wanted me to give her money. I felt my protective instincts flare, but stayed quiet, waiting. I told her no." Max continued. She cried, she raged, she tried every manipulation tactic in her playbook. She even threatened to hurt herself if I didn't help. And Mom, for the first time, I saw through it all. I called her parents and told them she was making threats, then I blocked her number. I chose peace over chaos. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Not with forgiveness, not yet, but with acknowledgement. That took courage, Max. He smiled sadly. No, Mom. Courage is what you showed at the cathedral. I just finally learned to say no to someone who never loved me. Our monthly coffee dates became a ritual. We never talked about money. When the bill came, we split it exactly down the middle. If Max couldn't afford his coffee that month, he ordered water and didn't apologize or explain. I learned things about my son I'd never known. That he loved jazz music, that he volunteered at the same grocery store teaching elderly customers how to use the self-checkout machines, that he was teaching himself Spanish from library books. He learned things about me, too. That I'd always wanted to travel but never felt I could. That I was taking oil painting classes. That Patricia and I were planning a cross-country road trip for the following summer. 6 months after our first coffee date, Max invited me to his apartment for dinner. It was a tiny studio, barely 400 square feet, with a Murphy bed and a kitchen the size of a closet. But it was clean and organized, decorated with thrift store finds and plants he was learning to keep alive. I know it's not much, he said, suddenly self-conscious as I looked around. But it's mine. I pay for it with my own money. Nobody can take it from me because I'm not stealing from anyone to have it. I hugged him then, really hugged him, for the first time since before the wedding. Max, I'm so proud of you. Not because of what you have, but because of how you got it. He made spaghetti, nothing fancy, just sauce from a jar and pasta boiled in a pot he'd bought at Goodwill. We ate sitting on lawn chairs at a card table because he didn't have proper furniture yet. And it was one of the best meals of my life. Not because the food was good, but because it was earned. Because my son had made it with his own hands, bought with his own money, shared without expectation. Mom, he said as we were washing dishes together in his tiny sink, I've been in therapy for 6 months now. Dr. Harrison says I'm ready to have a harder conversation with you if you're willing. My stomach tightened. What kind of conversation? About Dad, Max said quietly. About how I used your grief as a weapon. About how I knew you'd do anything for me because losing Dad made you terrified of losing me too. About how I exploited that fear for my own benefit. The words hung in the air between us, sharp and painful and necessary. I dried the last dish slowly, buying time to formulate my response. I knew you were doing that, Max. On some level, I always knew. But I convinced myself it was love. That if I just gave enough, sacrificed enough, loved hard enough, you'd eventually become the son I needed you to be. I used you, too, in a way. I made you responsible for filling the hole your father left. We both cried then, sitting on his Murphy bed in that tiny apartment, grieving not just for Tom, but for all the years we'd both been performing roles instead of being real with each other. I miss Dad, Max said, his voice breaking. I miss who I was when he was alive, before I learned I could manipulate you, before I became this person I hate. I pulled him close, this grown man who was still my baby boy somewhere deep inside. Max, you're not that person anymore. You're becoming someone new, someone your father would be proud of, someone I'm learning to be proud of too. After that night, something shifted between us. We started talking more frequently, not just at our monthly coffee dates, but in texts and occasional phone calls. Real conversations about real things. His therapy breakthroughs, my painting classes, Patricia's latest drama with her ex-husband, his growing friendship with his elderly co-workers at the grocery store. We were building something I'd never thought possible, an actual adult relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation or manipulation. It was fragile and new, like a seedling pushing through concrete. But it was real. More real than anything we'd had before. 1 year after the cathedral incident, Max called me with news. Mom, I paid off the last of my debt today. Every single dollar. It took 2 jobs and living like a monk, but I did it. I'm completely debt-free. The pride in his voice was palpable, and I felt it echoing in my own chest. Max, that's incredible. How does it feel? Like I can finally breathe, he said. Like I'm finally standing on solid ground instead of sinking sand. And Mom, I need to tell you something else. I've been putting aside $50 every paycheck. I have about $1,200 saved. It's not much compared to what I stole from you, but I want to start paying you back. Not because I expect forgiveness or because I think money can fix what I broke, but because it's the right thing to do. I thought about it for a long moment. Part of me wanted to refuse, to tell him to keep his hard-earned money. But I realized that would be another form of the old dynamic, me protecting him from the consequences of his actions. Max, I'll accept your payment on one condition. For every dollar you pay me back, I want you to put an equal dollar into a savings account for your future. Not to spend, but to build the foundation of a stable life. Deal? I could hear the smile in his voice. Deal, Mom. And thank you for letting me do this, for letting me earn back not just your money, but my self-respect. Patricia and I took our road trip that summer. We drove from coast to coast, staying in cheap motels and eating at local diners, seeing parts of America I'd only read about in books. In every new town, I sent Max a postcard. Not long messages, just, "Wish you were here," and a description of something beautiful I'd seen. He texted me photos back of his life, the community garden he'd joined, the English conversation group where he helped immigrants practice, the night sky from his tiny apartment window. We were learning to share our lives without consuming each other's. It felt revolutionary. When I returned home, there was a package waiting on my doorstep. Inside was a framed photograph, the only one I had of Tom, Max, and me together when Max was about 5 years old. We were at the beach house, all three of us laughing at something long forgotten. The frame was simple but well made, and there was a note attached. Mom, I found this photo in a box of stuff from the old house. I had it professionally restored. There was water damage and some fading. I wanted you to have it because I'm finally starting to remember who we were before everything got complicated. That little boy loved his parents. He just lost his way for a while. I'm finding my way back. Love, Max. I hung that photograph in my living room where I could see it every day. Not as a shrine to what was lost, but as a reminder of what was possible. That little boy did love his parents. And somewhere inside the man he'd become, that love was still there, just buried under years of selfishness and pain and poor choices. But he was excavating it, doing the hard work of becoming someone worthy of the love he'd been given. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. We weren't suddenly a perfect mother and son with no history of pain, but we were trying. And trying, I'd learned, was enough. Max met someone new that fall. Her name was Rebecca, and she was a social worker who volunteered at the same community center where Max taught job interview skills to unemployed workers. He was nervous when he told me about her, afraid I'd judge her or try to interfere. Mom, I need you to know, I'm not introducing you yet. Maybe not for a long time. I need to make sure this relationship is built on healthy foundations before I involve family. Is that okay? It was more than okay. It was exactly right. Max, I'm glad you're protecting both yourself and her. That shows real growth. He sighed with relief. Rebecca doesn't know about the wedding incident. I mean, she knows I made terrible choices in my past, but I haven't told her specifics. I'm afraid if she knew how bad I was, she'd leave. I thought carefully before responding. Max, if Rebecca is someone you can build a life with, she needs to know who you were so she can appreciate who you've become. Your past isn't something to hide. It's evidence of your capacity to change. But you'll know when the time is right to tell her. Trust yourself. You've earned that trust. 6 months later, Max called to tell me Rebecca knew everything. I told her about stealing from you, about the wedding, about Lena, all of it. I was terrified she'd walk away. But Mom, she said something that changed everything. She said, the man who did those things isn't the man sitting in front of me. I'm dating who you are now, not who you were then. But thank you for trusting me with your whole story. 2 years after the cathedral incident, on a random Tuesday afternoon, Max showed up at my door unannounced. Patricia was out, so it was just the two of us. Mom, can we talk? We sat on the porch. the same porch where I'd spent so many evenings alone, wondering if I'd done the right thing at the wedding. "I want to tell you something I've never said properly. Thank you." He turned to look at me directly, his eyes clear and honest in a way they hadn't been for years. "Thank you for loving me enough to let me fail. Thank you for refusing to enable me anymore. Thank you for standing up in that cathedral and telling the truth, even though it humiliated me. Because, Mom, if you hadn't done that, I'd probably be married to Lena right now, drowning in debt, still stealing from you, still being a terrible person. You saved my life that day." I felt tears streaming down my face. "Max, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than losing your father. Harder than working 3 jobs to support us. Harder than anything. Because every instinct I had screamed at me to protect you, to save you, to make it all okay." He took my hand. "I know. And that's exactly why it meant something. Because you loved me enough to let me face consequences. That's the truest love there is. Not the love that shields and enables, but the love that says, 'I believe you can survive this, and I believe you need to.'" We sat there together as the sun set, mother and son, no longer trapped in the old patterns, building something new from the rubble of what had been destroyed. Today, 3 years after the wedding that never was, Max and I have coffee every week. He's still in therapy, still working on himself, still choosing growth over comfort. He paid me back every penny he stole, and his savings account is growing steadily. Rebecca and I have become friends. She's smart and kind, and doesn't take any of Max's nonsense, which is exactly what he needs. They're talking about moving in together, and this time Max is doing it right, splitting costs equally, maintaining separate accounts, building a partnership based on respect rather than dependency. He asked if I wanted to help them pick out furniture. I said yes, but only if they let me pay for my own lunch afterward. He laughed and agreed. The foundation I started with my will has helped over 200 families dealing with financial elder abuse. I volunteer there twice a week, talking to other mothers and fathers whose children stole from them, used them, discarded them. I tell them my story, all of it, including the painful parts, including how I enabled Max for years before I found the courage to stop, including how standing up for myself felt like dying and being reborn at the same time. Many of them cry. Some of them hug me. All of them understand. And slowly, one by one, they start setting boundaries, start demanding respect, start choosing themselves. Patricia and I still live together, 2 elderly sisters reclaiming the time we lost while we were busy being mothers and wives and caretakers. We're planning another road trip for next summer, Alaska this time. Max and Rebecca might join us for part of it, but if they do, they'll pay their own way. Not because I can't afford it, but because that's how healthy relationships work. You give freely, but you don't give endlessly. You love fully, but you don't love destructively. You support without enabling. You connect without consuming. These are the lessons I learned standing in that cathedral, holding my portfolio of evidence, choosing truth over comfort. They're the lessons I'm still learning every day. Sometimes people ask me if I regret what I did, if I wish I'd handled it differently, more privately, less dramatically. The answer is no, not for a single second. Because that moment of public truth-telling wasn't just about Max. It was about every mother who's been taken advantage of by ungrateful children, every parent who's sacrificed everything only to be treated like garbage, every person who's been too afraid to set boundaries because they equated love with unlimited tolerance. I stood up in that cathedral not just for myself, but for all of us. And the message I sent, to Max, to Lena, to everyone watching, was simple but revolutionary. Love does not require you to accept abuse. Respect is not optional in family relationships. And it is never, ever too late to choose yourself. That's my story. The story of how I lost my son and found myself, and how we're both slowly, carefully finding each other again in a healthier way. It's not a perfect ending. Real life rarely is, but it's an honest one. Max is still learning. I'm still learning. We're both still healing, but we're doing it with our eyes open, with boundaries in place, with respect as the foundation instead of obligation or guilt. Would I change anything if I could go back? Only one thing. I would have set boundaries sooner. I would have demanded respect earlier. I would have taught Max from childhood that my love was infinite, but my tolerance for disrespect was not. What do you think? Would you have done the same thing in my position? Have you dealt with similar family dynamics? Leave me a comment below. I read every single one, and your stories help others feel less alone. Give this video a like if Margaret's journey resonated with you. And subscribe to my channel because I have many more stories like this one. Real stories about real people facing impossible choices and finding the courage to choose themselves. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. And remember, it's never too late to set yourself free.